Welcome to Ceasefire, where civics meets civility and engagement meets empowerment. Ceasefire is hosted by former Boerne ISD trustee and owner of the Boerne Bookshop, Dale Adams, and by former Boerne City Council member and local insurance agent, Ron Cisneros. Ready, aim, ceasefire.
Good morning, Kendall County. This is Ceasefire, brought to you by the Boerne Bookshop. My name is Dale Adams.
And I'm Ron Cisneros.
And today we're going to ask a question that probably sort of floating around a lot of different places right now, but for us it's just, what makes you a citizen of Boerne? We could go a lot of different directions with this, but I think we're going to sort of talk about governance in Boerne and how that impacts citizenship.
Yeah.
Or residency, maybe, would be a better term. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to start by going to the local government code for the state of Texas and describing the legal description of what that means to be a municipality, to be a city. And there are certain requirements first, and the very first thing that has to happen is you have to incorporate. All right, so prior to that, you're just a town. You're a spot on a map, but you're not a legal city until you go through the incorporation process. And this can get real heady because you got a couple of different ways you can go.
Like Comfort.
Correct.
It's a town, but it's not legally incorporated.
It's not a city,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so usually what happens is you incorporate and you start off as a general law city. And so you've got a few things that you can do, but not many powers. And to incorporate, you have to have a population minimum, and then there's a maximum on your physical size, on your square miles, based on the number of people that you have.
A density kind of requirement.
Correct.
Yeah.
So these are the legal requirements, and then you've got to have set boundaries. There has to be a line around this municipality that says this is the end of this place here, right? And only the people inside of that are the true legal residents of that city. Right? And this is what we're going to talk about today, because this presents some challenges because, as you know, there are a lot of people who live outside the city and still see themselves as Boerneites, or, they live just outside of San Antonio, and they don't say, well, I'm a Bexar Countyan, or whatever that is, right? Okay. I'm from San Antonio, and sometimes that's convenience. When I travel internationally and people ask me where I'm from, I'm not going to tell them I'm from Boerne because nobody knows where that is. So I tell them I'm from the San Antonio area. Yeah. And most people, I don't care where you are, Iceland, Argentina, oh, the Alamo. Yes. Yeah. And
I live right next door to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm in the basement.
Yeah. So to clarify, I live outside the city limits, but I have a business inside the city limits. I'm not a citizen of Boerne, am I?
No, and that's an interesting, because I do want to talk about that. When I was on city council, we would refer to you as a stakeholder.
Okay,
right?
Which is a very vague term, but
it is a vague term, and you can apply that across different groups of people. So, a business owner, or there are people who acquire property in Boerne, but inside the city limits, but they don't live here, right? Or they operate a business here, but they don't live here, or they have some sort of vested interest. Perhaps they're keen on, let's say they're keen on monarch butterflies. And we know that those monarch butterflies once a year will come through here, right? And they want to protect as many of them as possible. And so they want to maybe set up a butterfly garden, right? And so we might consider them a stakeholder because of that.
Wait. I think you've lost me here. Somebody who likes monarch butterflies is a stakeholder in Boerne?
Yeah, because the monarch butterflies come through. Maybe that's a poor
what if
example.
they live in Louisiana? Stakeholder, I've always found a very vague term, and now I'm thinking it's even vaguer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
now I got another question for you.
Okay, sure.
Supreme Court a few years back ruled that corporations were people. Does that mean that my bookstore is a citizen of Boerne? Or am I just being facetious? I mean, some of these legal... You're getting into the sort of legalese of all this, and I'm like, okay, there's some interesting, rabbit holes in there.
Well, I'm glad you asked me that question, actually, because there has to be a point where you say, here are the people who can vote.
Yes.
Here are the people who can make a decision on the long-term plans of the city. Here are the people who can determine what the laws of the city are going to be and who the representatives are going to be. You have to draw that line somewhere.
Right.
Otherwise, the term city is meaningless.
Right, right.
And I don't want to take that identity of a Boerneite away from anybody. And I think right now probably is a good time to talk about some of those things that unify us as Boerne. And that would be things like the school district. Mm-hmm. And and when I say the school district, I'm talking specifically about the Boerne Independent School District, which happens to cross over into Bexar County. And it spills over on the north outside of city limits, and to the east outside of city limits, and to the west outside of city limits. And a lot of folks, because their children attend BISD schools, will refer to themselves amongst their other friends in San Antonio or Austin as Boerneites, right? I live in Boerne. You do that, right?
Yep.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's your connection to somewhere, just like when I went to Germany, I would tell people, well, I'm from San Antonio, really at a convenience, or it was something that I could identify with, right?
Yeah. So there's two types of Boerne then. There's the community of Boerne, which is sort of this amorphous group of people that live around this area. And then there's the city, which is a demarcated, specific plot of land that is ruled by a governing body that's controlled only by the people that physically live within that city.
Correct.
We mix them up a lot, but they're actually very different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there are things, like I mentioned, like the school district, that unify that sense of community. Mm-hmm. There are other little factors. The zip code. Yeah. We see that. Yeah. That's a common one. And an example of that outside of Boerne would be people who refer to themselves as 09ers. Or, I'm from Alamo Heights because I'm in the 09. And there are people in Terrell Hills, which is in and of itself its own city, but they identify as Alamo Heights because of that 09 zip code, right? And we do that here a little bit, from the 06, right? Yeah. In San Antonio, it's real popular right now to say, I'm from the 210. In the Valley, they'll say I'm from the 956. So we're using area codes.
I've never done that.
You know?
No.
I've seen Spurs caps and shirts now that have 210 and Spurs colors, and so it's a popular thing. Yeah. Maybe among the youth. I don't know.
Maybe so.
Yeah, I don't say I'm from the 830 because that includes some other towns I'm not quite fond of. So I'm from Boerne, dang it.
Right.
But yeah, and those things, I think it's great because it does create unification, that sense of community, that idea that you were talking about. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The problem is when I was on city council, sometimes we had to make some decisions. And who was I going to listen to? The community,
right? The
stakeholders, or the people who were legal residents of the city of Boerne?
Right. When it comes down to it, decisions are made by the citizens.
Correct. Yeah. And that's tough.
That brings up another thought, an analogy here. My store has its own community. It has its customers. It has its workers. But when it comes to making a decision, it's only the owners that make that decision. Mm-hmm. I'll seek input from people. And so there's a line there, the Boerne Bookshop, the owner makes decisions, but there's still this community of Boerne Bookshop people. Things are changing, and they don't like it, but they need to recognize that they're part of the community, not part of the ownership decision-making body.
Right.
Yeah.
I had an interesting conversation several years ago with somebody at the library, and we were in that public meeting space, and this was a county resident, and she was upset because library policies, and she said, we pay taxes. You remember because you were there. Yeah. She said, we pay taxes for this. And I asked her, not to be a jerk, but I said, well, so which of the taxes that you pay are supporting the public library? And she didn't quite understand the question, but eventually I asked it again, and she eventually understood where I was coming from. That she didn't actually pay any taxes at all. As a county resident, she wasn't supporting the Boerne Public Library, and she didn't have any access to it, I can understand that sense of community that we talked about made her feel like that was her library. There wasn't any other library around. I think there's one up in Comfort and there's one up in Candelia that the county supports. But she wasn't from either of those areas. She was out in the Bergheim area. And so she didn't have a library of her own. This was her library in her mind.
Yeah.
And I don't blame her for thinking that. And as I mentioned, I go down to the valley a lot. I spend a lot of money there. I support the hotels. I pay a lot in hotel motel tax and sales tax. But the library in Weslaco, I'm not a stakeholder. I'm not a stakeholder in the McAllen Library or the Harlingen Library.
Yeah. You know, I think some of that comes from the phrase no taxation without representation, which is a great slogan, but you can't tie votes to taxation directly. You have to find something that you can actually physically see, like a person's body, because we pay taxes all over the place. You know, you buy something, you go travel someplace, you pay taxes there. You're paying taxes every time you pay anything, you're paying taxes. And you can't use that as a method of defining ownership of something.
Right.
But the phrase is great, but it needs to be understood that it's a sort of a conceptual thing, not a specific thing.
Right. Yeah, you certainly wouldn't go overseas or even across the border and insist with the government of Mexico that you have a right now to dictate policy down there because they taxed you.
Exactly.
It's not your country.
Right. So the same applies to the Boerne Library.
Right. And so that's difficult for people to understand that sometimes when because my argument with Mexico doesn't really hold water if you don't have that sense of community with Mexico, right? Here locally, you think you do.
Yeah, I definitely can feel like I'm a part of the Boerne community.
Yeah.
I tell everybody that's where I'm from.
You know, Barron owns this radio station, and I think we owe him a break.
Okay, well, we will take a quick break here. This is Ceasefire with Dale and Ron. We'll be right back. Boerne has its own bookshop. In fact, it's called the Boerne Bookshop. Hi, I'm Dale Adams, inviting you to get lost. Get lost in a good book in our relaxed and casual atmosphere. We have a wide and eclectic selection in the Boerne Bookshop. We pride ourselves on finding what you're looking for. We do author meet and greets, host writing workshops, and can connect you with a good book club. And your young ones will absolutely love our kids section at the Boerne Bookshop. And while we want you to get lost, we're easy to find, as we're in the heart of Boerne, at the back of the Richter Tavern building. We are the Boerne Bookshop. Welcome back to Ceasefire with Dale and Ron, and we are within the boundaries of Boerne Radio Studio, and which are within the boundaries of the city of Boerne, even though I'm not a citizen of Boerne. I've got that clear now, I think.
But you're in the community.
But I am in the community.
And we're glad you're here.
Well, thank you.
So I want to talk about why this distinction is so important. And a lot of this comes from my experience on city council. We always had an open policy at our meetings. Anybody could come talk to us. And, we didn't really care where you were from. And so we'd often hear from people that were outside the city limits who wanted to have a voice in things like the new city hall, what it should look like, whether we should have one or not. And it never failed that when I would hold the line and say, well, ultimately I have to listen to my voters, which is my constituents, that would just send them off on a tailspin. Like, oh my gosh, you're not listening to me. And it's like, well, I am, but I can't take that into consideration because you're not a constituent. You're not a legal resident. Now, this is important. And I know right now there are a lot of people that are like, oh, but let me explain something because this is very important. There was another issue while I was on council that was taking place in the eastern part of the county that was very controversial, but it was outside of city limits. And I had a group of people come up to me, non-city residents, and they said, we want you to speak out against this. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And because I said that, there was an assumption that I was for that project. And I had to explain to him that I never said I was for that project. I never said I'm against that project. What I said is I'm not going to speak out against that project because it's outside of city limits, and therefore it is outside of my legal authority. Right?
Wait. You were staying in your lane?
Exactly.
Whoa. Wow, now there's a rare one.
Yeah. And the example I would give to them is that imagine if someone from California, from the state legislature of California, had got on CNN or Fox News and told the state of Texas, you need to do X or you need to do Y. Now, it happens all the time. But what is your immediate reaction when you're watching the news or listening to the news and you hear that, you know, so-and-so in Minnesota or so-and-so in New York or Pennsylvania says that Abbott needs to do this or Abbott needs to do that, right? You say, well, you know what? Why don't you just stay in Minnesota or California and mind your own business?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And so I take that very seriously. As a councilman, I said, okay, well, that's not in my wheelhouse. That's not for me to decide. That's for that community out there to decide. And I'm going to stay within the lines of the city of Boerne.
You know, if more public officials did that, then maybe people would understand the value of those boundaries more. Because a lot of times people go to elected officials and say, hey, help support this, that, or the other thing. They say, oh, yeah, okay. And they don't stop themselves from stepping outside their lane. Mm-hmm. And if they did that more often, people might realize, okay, I actually need to go to the county commissioner to talk about this, or I need to go here or there, rather than just going to somebody I happen to know that's in the city council that should have nothing to do with it.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, having said all that, I think it's important that we recognize that at times it's very important for us to listen to those stakeholders, whatever that term means, outside the city limits. In the state of Texas, especially out in West Texas, there are a lot of counties that you'll only have one incorporated city in the entire county. Right?
Well, Kendall County. We've only got one.
Yeah. Well, technically, we have two because there's a little bit of Fair Oaks Ranch.
Oh, right.
In Kendall County. But yeah, for the most part, there's one incorporated city. That happens to be the county seat. And sometimes you see unhealthy divides. Now, you don't see that sense of community and community spirit gets ripped apart. And it's like, well, we're county or we're city. Right?
Yeah.
And it's odd to me how you've got these unifying things like the school district and the zip code and the area code, and then you have these issues that come up that are divisive.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think that comes from sort of a human nature kind of thing of tribalizing. Mm-hmm. And when people have opinions, they sort of look for that tribe that matches it, and then they start solidifying with that. And it's kind of unfortunate, but I think it's just human nature.
Right.
Yeah.
But we need each other.
Yes.
Oftentimes you're able to live in the county and enjoy the benefits of the county. No city taxes, a little more space, a little more elbow room. You can enjoy that because there's a city that anchors all of the things that you need. We don't have, I'm going to pick on Boerne. We don't have an international airport. If I want to get to Mexico, I've got to go into San Antonio. And if you're in Bergheim, for example, you don't have an HEB, so you need to roll into Boerne. You don't have an Ace or a Home Depot, so you have to roll into Boerne. And so you can't get in a little camp and say, I don't need Boerne, and Boerne can't get in a little camp and say, oh, well, we don't need the rest of the county.
Right. We're all interconnected.
Right.
And all these communities connect in different ways, a variety of ways. The issue of the boundaries comes to the governance.
Correct.
And that's where we have to draw lines. But we need to recognize that the communities blend and are all interconnected in the real world.
Right.
But the governance has to have some lines to say, okay, this person has a say.
Right.
That person doesn't.
And we have to really respect those lines when we're on the other side, and so I mean, when I go through Waring or Comfort, sure, I might think, it'd be nice if they had X, but then I always walk that back and say, but this is not my community.
Right.
That's not for me to decide. It's funny. Buc-ee's very controversial topic, right? It's to this day, it's a controversial topic, and I'll hear people say all the time, "Why didn't they build it in comfort? That's more like their MO, right? Or that should have been built in comfort." And, well, have you talked to anybody in comfort and see if they wanted that? It's very convenient to kick that anthill down the road and pass it off to somebody else, but you don't know that they wanted it.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
That wasn't a comfort decision.
Yes, but people have opinions about everything.
Well, they sure do.
Yes, they do, which is okay. It's just important to recognize that an opinion isn't a right to decision making.
Right.
Yeah. I've got a couple of books I'm going to bring out. I didn't know which way the conversation was going, so I brought a bunch of different stuff. We have the standard sort of History of Boerne by Jefferson Morgenthaler and another one by Brent Evans, which are really cool at the Boerne Bookshop. They are not just about what happened inside the city limits. These are sort of community-based histories, so they're pretty cool.
All right.
Now, if you really want to be a diehard Boerne guy or gal, we've got Ludwig Boerne's excerpts from his diary. Mm-hmm. It's in German. I can't read it. It's reprinted from like 150 or 200 years ago. I'm not sure exactly when it was originally made. I don't know if we've ever sold a copy of this, but I saw it and I thought, okay, we have to have this because this is Boerne, right? So this is who Boerne's named after, even though he never came over to the U.S. And then if you really get wrapped up in the whole citizenship issue, we've got Nolo's Guide to Becoming a U.S. Citizen, a guide to the law, exam, and interview. So if anybody really wants to confirm their citizenship here in Boerne, there's a guide for them.
There are a lot of people, I'm thinking now, nationally and internationally, that would probably consider themselves part of the Boerne community because of Boerne Radio.
They could be. Yeah.
Would you
Some
agree?
of our listeners out there. Yeah.
Can I tell you something?
Yeah.
I got an email from a guy in Kansas, and he says his favorite nostalgia station went off the air, and so he just Googled and found Boerne Radio, and he's a retired sheriff, walks his dog, and listens to Boerne Radio. He says, I listen for an hour while I'm walking, and I keep listening. And he goes, I feel like I know more of what's going on in Boerne than I do in my own hometown.
That's great. Just remind him that he can't vote here.
No matter how much he listens.
Here's the punchline to that. He says, I feel like I can go sit in Tootie Pie and just hang out and drink coffee and talk to the locals. And so I shared it with Brian at Tootie Pie, and he sent him a pie.
Oh, that's cool.
Would you tell him that I said the same thing? I like cherry.
That's community,
That is.
I like that. That's cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of neat things about our community like that. You see that a lot. We have a very philanthropic community, and people do things for each other constantly. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I really like about this community.
Same here.
Yeah. And that's why I call myself a Boerneite, even though I don't live here.
All right. I just better not see your name on any ballot or anything.
No. Though I've always said if this might be a threat or a promise, I'm not sure which, but if they ever come out and annex around my property, I'll be running for city council. So maybe that'll hold them off of that.
Nice.
When you first started talking about, and you've talked about the issue of city boundaries and stuff, it reminds me of the phrase, good fences make good neighbors. Mm-hmm. And I think it all comes down to people knowing their lane and what they have a right to change or have an official say in. If they stick to that, things work well because then everybody understands who has the right to make the changes, and so having a county official trying to sway the city government or the city government trying to sway a county official, if they just stay away from that kind of stuff, I'm not saying there's any of that here, I'm just saying in general, it helps people understand where the authority lies. So when you've got an issue here in Boerne, you know that you should go to the city, or maybe you should go to the county, even though it's in a city. Maybe there's some issues that are specific to the county that you should address there. And I think it's good for people to stay in their lane and understand what those lanes mean. And
I think that starts with civics, which is something we talk a lot about in the show, understanding the role of government, what it's supposed to do, what it's not supposed to do, and then understanding your role within that system too.
Yes, because we're all part of that system, especially here in America, where we consider this a citizen-supported government.
Yeah.
So it's important to know where we have our responsibilities, such as voting,
Right.
And where we should sort of step back and let other people have their.
I'm going to go back to what I was talking about earlier in the show when I think I mentioned, or maybe I failed to mention, that when we had a mayoral election a few years ago, there were people who came from the county very excited about voting for Frank Ritchie. He's a beloved guy, right? And they found the polls. They got there, weren't registered in the city, and they couldn't understand that. Well, I'm registered to vote. Yeah, but you're not a city resident. This is a mayoral election. And they were furious that they couldn't vote for Frank.
They'd mixed up the community of Boerne with the city of Boerne.
Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes nationally, we get really worked up about, I don't know, let's just say the governor, whatever state you don't like. You pick which team color you're on, and it's the opposite team. You're just mad. How could that state vote for that guy? He's a dodo, right? And it's, and I have to ask, well, why do you care? Right? Like, why does it matter to you? Did you have a voice in that? No, right? And so, localize everything. Look at your own community. Or is it working? Is it functioning? Do you like the people that represent you?
That's where you put your effort.
That's where you put your effort in, right? Because that's where you have a say.
Yeah.
That's where you have input. That's where you can actually make a difference.
And you can make a difference here by listening to Boerne Radio regularly. And if you missed any of this, you can always go to BoerneRadio.com, listen to our podcast and all the other ones, and even listen to the radio station live and stream it. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.